The Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, in cooperation with ICN 6, presents Election 2006. And now your host, Steve Stevens.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for tuning in. Election 2006. I'm Steve Stevens with the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and yes, you've guessed it, it's that time again. We're getting very close to an election. November 7th is the day, and part of our program that we provide to you is to also encourage you to get out there and vote on November 7th, because your vote really does count. As we do at each of these programs, it's our opportunity to try to introduce you to a variety of the candidates that are running in some of the most important races all over Northern Kentucky at many levels, judicial races, legislative races, and even city and county races. And many will be on the ballot, so it's important for you to get knowledgeable of them. And if we can help you understand the issues as well as get to know some of these candidates, then you'll be better prepared as you go to the polls. Let's get started today, because today we have a legislative race that we're going to be focused on. Today we're focusing on the 69th Legislative District, and that's a district that really spans across the three counties in Northern Kentucky. It's a very unusual-looking district, isn't it, gentlemen?
Yes, it is.
That really sort of horseshoes through Boone, Kenton, and Campbell counties. It is going to be an open seat race because it is being vacated through the retirement of Representative John David Reinhardt, one of our longest-serving members in the House in Northern Kentucky. He'd occupied that seat since 1984, so been a long time in that race, or in that seat. So. With me today are the two candidates that are in this race, and let me introduce them to you. First is Adam Koenig. Adam is currently a county commissioner in Kenton County and has been involved in some small business activities over the years. He lives in Erlanger currently with his wife, Elena. So welcome, Adam. Thanks for being with us. And also running in this race is Randy Blankenship. And Randy's lived most of his life in Erlanger, I think maybe Florence was part of it.
Well, until I was about 8 years old.
And then Erlanger. But nevertheless, Northern Kentucky your entire life, I think.
Correct.
And he served as a city council member since 2002 in Erlanger. And professionally, he's an attorney with the law firm of Robbins, Kelly, Patterson, and Tucker, and that's a Cincinnati firm. So, Randy, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. The first thing we like to do is really kind of get to know these candidates and find out, what's really motivating them to be in this capacity. So, Randy, let me start with you. Why do you want this office, and what do you think qualifies you for it?
Okay. Well, I was approached about running for this office, actually, somewhat ironically, by a group of Republicans who asked me to run for this office because they felt like we were not getting our fair representation in Frankfort. And I looked into the race and looked into the record of this district, and I felt that that was true, that we were not getting our fair share from Frankfort. We were sending a lot more down there than we were getting back. And I felt like we needed somebody in there who was representing us who could really actually bring more back to the district. I felt I was the most qualified person to do that. These individuals who approached me felt that I was the most qualified person to do that. And they're willing to cross party lines to support me to do this because they still feel that I am the best qualified individual for this district. I think from a background standpoint, I have a good background to represent this district. My kids are in the public schools, so obviously I have a great interest in seeing our schools do well. As a lawyer, I think I've seen some areas where the law needs to be improved. As a city councilman, I've seen where the cities need our help. As a parent of the children in schools, I've seen where the schools need our help. So I believe I have the broad-based background that will be of help in this district.
Very well. And Adam Koenig, been in county commission for a while, but talk a little bit about why you want to make this jump to the legislative level.
Well, I didn't have any plans or anticipations of going this route, but when John David decided not to run again, I took a look at the race and thought it would be an excellent opportunity for me to take my 8 years of experience on the fiscal court, 3 years experience on city council to Frankfort, talk about local issues, take my experience in local government, my knowledge of getting things done, my experience getting things done to Frankfort, and I think I'm best suited to lead us forward. There's a lot of very important issues that need to be addressed. Healthcare is a large issue that affects every family in this district, and I want to work toward lowering healthcare costs. I want to work to getting more of our money back from Frankfort. For too many years, we've been the poor stepchild here in Northern Kentucky, and I think I'm best suited to help bring some of that money back. So I look forward to discussing these issues later this half an hour.
Before we have to go to our first break, let's just get into one topic, and we may take a break and let Randy finish this subject. But our state budget, education, primarily consumes the state budget, and really it's at all levels. But it seems that not only are there funding equity issues, but always adequacy issues for our districts in Northern Kentucky as well. Can you comment on that and what work you might do in the legislature?
Well, I could probably spend half an hour on this topic, but the short answer is we need to change the SEEK formula, which has typically given Northern Kentucky and other growing areas a bad deal. So much of our money goes to other parts of the state. With regards to that, we need to make sure that Northern Kentucky University is well funded, and it's been better taken care of the last few years. Gateway is moving forward. You know, NKU got some additional money with the College of Informatics. The Advanced Manufacturing Center at Gateway are both huge improvements, but those improvements need to continue. We here in Northern Kentucky are one of the economic engines. Frankfort needs to invest in Northern Kentucky if we're going to continue to get the Ashlands and the Fidelities of the world to come and relocate here. So if a quality, educated populace will continue to create jobs.
And of course, a challenge for you all, I think, is as you look at education, at least at the primary and secondary level too, you know, the communities that you represent are different.
Yes.
And you have some suburban districts, you have some that are a little more rural, and then even getting into some urban. Each of those have a unique set of circumstances relative to funding. Some have their own sources that go along with it. It affects the formula and the way the allocation is brought back. So, you know, there's not just one way to fix this that will really help everyone. Folks, we're going to take a short time out. When we come back, we're going to keep this conversation going on education. I'm going to hear from Randy Blankenship, so don't go away. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for tuning in Election 2006. This is Steve Stevens. I'm with the candidates running for the 69th House District in the Kentucky General Assembly. With me is Adam Koenig and Randy Blankenship. And Randy, we're coming back to you. We had been discussing education and education funding in particular, difficulties we have funding things. I want you to comment on that, but I also want to take a moment and say, you know, priorities last session were to focus on teacher pay and also funding technology and to try to make some improvements. I think we did make some strides there. What are some of the next priorities that we ought to be focused on?
Well, I do think, as he mentioned, we need to work on the SEEK formula, because that does put us in Northern Kentucky at a disadvantage. There are four school districts within the 69th district, all of whom receive significantly less money than the state average under the SEEK formula. So that definitely needs to be an area of priority in terms of how we allocate our resources that we do have. In terms of the priorities, we did make some good strides in the 2006 session of the General Assembly. I think the increase in teacher pay was excellent. We need to continue that. We need to make sure that the General Assembly continues to fund that when it's not an election year as well. We also need to continue working on the computer technologies. That's a big issue as well. And again, we did make some good strides. We need to continue making those strides because we have fallen behind over the years in that area, and we're trying to catch back up. So those are very important. The other issues I think that to me seem to be priorities, first off, are physical facilities. If you look at some of the schools in our district, for example, Lloyd High School, which is the school I am most familiar with because that's where my daughter attends, that's where I attended. It was a fairly nice modern school when I graduated from it in 1979. It's fallen behind a little bit since then. It certainly needs to be helped. And they're trying to look at that, but it costs so much that the school district itself cannot afford to take care of that. So physical facilities is definitely a priority to me. Another area of priority, I think, has to be actually in the classroom itself. And by that, what I've done, one area of law that I have focused on a lot is representing children with disabilities, trying to attain for them educational services that they need. And that's been very difficult, not because the school districts do not want to give these kids what they need, but they're trying to allocate some very scarce resources as well. One area where I think we could really save ourselves money in the long run would be to allocate some significant funds towards early reading intervention within the primary grades. Study upon study has shown if you can if you can catch reading problems in the first 3 years of education, first, second, and third grade, if you can address them and remediate them within that time frame, that child's going to have a much better chance of success later on. So to me, that really needs to be an area where we need to focus, working on that reading intervention. Many of our schools in this area do not have reading specialists in their schools, and we really need to work on that.
It is a costly thing and very important thing. I remember as a member of a site-based council myself making the decisions about where do we find funds to hit that very issue when we have so many other things to worry about. Let's move to the budget and talk about the fact that, of course, Adam mentioned before, we've been fighting for a long time to get our fair share. The fact of the matter is the pot may need to get a little bigger because there's so many mouths to feed. We all have infrastructure needs. We all have projects we'd like funded. You got any ideas on additional revenue sources? What about the possibility and the viability of new revenue sources in the General Assembly?
Well, I think one thing we have to do is work on economic development. And to me, that ties hand in hand with the educational issue. If you interview employers about when they're thinking of relocating, one reason that Kentucky has had some problems, and this may be less in northern Kentucky as is other areas of the state, but one reason they've had problems is they don't believe they're going to have a qualified workforce. So we do need to continue to improve our educational system. I think that's a long-term way of helping our economic development. Obviously, improving Gateway and working on NKU to see that it's adequately funded. I'm a graduate of Northern Kentucky University. I definitely want to see that institution protected. So we need to work on the educational system. That will help us with economic development. I think we can also be useful in, with tax incentives to draw businesses in. We've done that in Erlanger. That's why Toyota's national headquarters is in Erlanger. That's a tremendous boon to the city, and they've been a great corporate citizen for us as well. You can use those things to help bring in businesses, and that does increase the pie. We can obviously work on economies as well. There's certainly some room to cut in that budget.
Adam, let's hear your thoughts about that budget, but particularly let's focus on the revenue sources.
Well, we have to invest in education, which we've said many times before. One additional thing I've like to talk about a little bit with education is we need to look at providing different languages in our education system. We're still teaching the same languages of French, Spanish, and German, which are all wonderful languages, but the world's changing. We need to start looking at teaching Mandarin Chinese and Japanese and Hindi and Arabic to become more competitive on the world stage. We need to invest in our infrastructure if we're going to have success here in Northern Kentucky. There are people in Campbell County who live in this district who don't even have high-speed internet access. That is an impediment to economic growth in this district. We can implement right-to-work legislation, which will make Northern Kentucky more economically friendly and make Kentucky more economically friendly. It works in other states, and I would like to see it implemented here. And last but not least, the main concern, all these things are headed toward creating more taxpayers. Whatever we can do to make this state more business-friendly, we need to do that. We need to lower health care costs to attract businesses. And all these things I look forward to working on.
And we have other opportunities out there people consider all the time. We've increased the cigarette tax just a little bit to add some revenue. Again, we're talking about gaming, even though it probably isn't on the horizon in the near term. But by the way, Ohio's looking at it as a ballot initiative, and that'll put a lot of pressure on us if we see that pass over there. Let's get into another topic that's important to us, and that's employment issues. We're going to take a break in a minute, but let me start the topic with you. And Adam, I'm going to stay with you. We talk about the cost of public infrastructure, and Kentucky has a prevailing wage law and is not a right-to-work state, and quite frankly, mandating that prevailing wage be paid on public works projects, such as new schools, roads, other projects. There have been many studies that would indicate that adds to the cost.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about us losing some opportunities there and some revenue.
I don't think there's any doubt that prevailing wage adds to the cost of public projects. It artificially inflates the cost of public projects. And it's terrific that we have the opportunity to pay people at a higher rate for public projects. But when someone in the private sector builds a building for, let's say, $1 million, and the government has to pay 15 to 20% more to build that exact same building, that is a poor use of taxpayer dollars. If I, as a county commissioner, voted to pay 15 or 20% more for the gasoline that we use in our cars, I'd be chastised, and I should be, because that is a waste of money that could go to other services like education or infrastructure, or could go back into the pockets of the taxpayers of this area. So that needs to be repealed on all levels for all public projects. Boone County has a portion of this district is building a new school a year for 5 years, and that has to be done because that is just a waste of Boone County taxpayer dollars.
We're going to have to take a short break. I'm going to come back to you in
Okay.
a minute, Adam, on right to work when we come back from the break. But stay tuned. We've got a lot more to talk about as we close out this session with our two candidates, so don't go away. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for tuning in. Election 2006. We're interviewing two candidates that are running for the 69th House District in the Kentucky General Assembly. It's Adam Koenig and Randy Blankenship. I'm talking with Adam right now about some employment issues. We just talked about prevailing wage and what effects it has on Kentucky projects. Just briefly, Adam, I'd like to hear about your thoughts about right to work, or in some cases people call it employee choice. But the fact is, some folks have said maybe we lose economic development opportunities because we are not an employee choice or a right to work state. How do you feel about that?
There's any number of studies that argue on both sides, but I believe that this ought to be a right to work state. There's plenty of opportunities out there that are being missed in economic development because of it, and I do believe that you should have control over whether or not you join a union. That just frankly seems like a democratic American thing to me, and so that I believe in it strongly.
And Randy, back to you on, first of all, prevailing wage. We talked about infrastructure, how hard it is to get dollars. What about the studies that say it adds to the cost? And the fact of the matter, if we have prevailing wage, then maybe we don't get as much money. We could get more money for projects if we didn't have it. And then we'll talk about right to work.
Well, actually, there's any number of studies that prove the exact opposite as well. The Journal of Education Finance did a study of school construction from 1991 through 2004, and they found on square foot cost of construction of schools that there was no appreciable difference between prevailing wage states and no prevailing wage states. So I don't think that's correct. As far as his statement that we could save 15 to 20% by getting rid of prevailing wage, the wage cost, the labor cost of a school construction project is only 19.8% anyway. So the only way we could save 20% is not pay the workers at all, which is just absurd. We're not going to do that. So his numbers don't add up. It's just not going to work.
Make sure we understand that number, though, real quick. Tell me again the
Labor,
19%.
Right. If you look at school construction and any public construction projects, the average labor cost nationally is 19.8% according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we're not going to save 20% if we cut back on, if we get rid of prevailing wage, because obviously it's going to be, we're not going to eliminate their wages, we're just talking about cutting them. Secondly, from a philosophical standpoint, I just don't agree that we should be saving our money by cutting back on workers. I think we should do our best to raise the standard of living for workers rather than lower it. When states have gotten rid of these prevailing wage laws, workers have typically obviously received less money. That has less money in the economy because they have less money to spend at that point, so it has some downstream cost to the economy as well. So it doesn't really work.
And your comments on the state not being a right-to-work state and the fact that some folks say, hey, it makes us a less desirable place to come with economic development projects, folks that are looking to locate.
Well, that's, again, I would say is a myth. There's been several studies that prove to the contrary. Louisiana State University actually did a study within the last couple of years. And what they did was they gave potential employers a survey. You're asking them, if you are intending to relocate, here's 25 factors. What are the importance of those factors? Right to work ranked 24th out of 25 possibles. It was obviously a low priority item. I would also point out that there's no proof empirically to show that we're actually losing jobs because of the lack of this right-to-work legislation. Oklahoma recently enacted right-to-work legislation. That's a good example. They've lost 24,000 jobs since enacting right-to-work legislation. So, to say that this is going to draw employers in is simply not consistent with the evidence. People in the right-to-work states typically make less money, have a higher degree of infant mortality, have higher degree of percentage of uninsured individuals, and it lowers the standard of living. And I think as government, when we're able to do so, we should be elevating the standard of living, not lowering it. We shouldn't be trying to balance our budget and save money on the backs of workers.
We are going to have a debate, I'm sure, in the General Assembly this session on minimum wage, too. That's not a topic I'm going to cover here today, but that's a different subject that I think there's going to be a debate on both sides of the fence, Randy. Same kind of dynamics and the same kind of factors, I think, are coming into play. Let's shift to something else, though, that is on the minds of everyone. That's health care and the cost of health care. Businesses obviously provide a tremendous amount of health care benefits to employees, and most citizens seem very frustrated about it. And each year legislators in Frankfort attempt to do some things to it. Unfortunately, in many cases, they add to the problem rather than help the problem. And what are your views on controlling insurance costs and health care costs?
Well, there's no doubt that it's a serious problem. I mean, I'm one of the owners of our law firm as a business, and I mean, we go to buy health insurance every year, and we see these massive increases that we're faced with as well. So I've personally experienced the problem you're talking about here. I think there are some things we can do to achieve some economies. One thing is that the Senate last time, Senate Bill 2, was dealing with the e-health network, dealing with electronic access to medical records, enabling doctors. I think that'll to share medical records that way. That's going to save on some administrative costs, which will help us save some money. Another area we look at is prescription drugs. The Medicaid law was recently passed to allow prescription drug benefit, which actually puts more of a burden on the state. There's a lawsuit presently being filed that's going to challenge that clawback provision that could save the state up to $88 million a year. Another area where we can look at is reimportation of prescription drugs. State auditor did a study on that issue recently as well and showed that that would save the state significant monies as well.
Adam, I need to go quickly to you because we're running out of time. Give me some thoughts about health care in a minute.
Well, the most important issue we need to tackle is medical malpractice reform. There's going to be a large difference, I think, in this race. We need to put caps on punitive damages that can be leveled. I've had any number of doctors and insurance companies and actuarials tell me that this will do a great deal to help slow the growth, slow the increase in the costs. More than half of our counties in this state, you can't find an OBGYN. Women in the state have to drive 50 miles to get babies delivered because it's just too expensive to be an OBGYN in Kentucky. So that needs to be done. It needs to be done immediately. I'm a big supporter of it. We also need to support the governor's changes in Medicaid. A lot of what my opponent talked about are good ideas, but there are a lot of rough around the edges, a little bit here, a little bit there. We need serious change.
Well, thanks. As you can tell, there are a number of topics we could get into in great detail and many more that we wish we could have the time to talk about, but we're out of time. So, folks, first of all, let me say thank you to both my guests, Randy Blankenship, Adam Koenig, for being on our show. If you'd like more information about these candidates or others that are running in the election in 2006, you can go to our website. That's www.nkyvoterguide.com. It's probably on the screen. So thanks for tuning us in, and we'll continue to bring you more candidates and more issues, and so tune right into ICN 6. Thanks for watching.